work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it, work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
So, welcome to the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. We're here with a special guest. Could you introduce yourself for the listeners today?
I will, thank you. My name is Roxanne, and Roxanne O'Brien, and I'm a mom, an activist, and also known as a community organizer, mostly working on environmental justice.
Hell yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the Northern Meadows recycling plant and how you've been involved in the organizing around Northern Meadows?
Yeah, so I live in North Minneapolis. I'm actually from California, so my mom moved to the Twin Cities, but between North and Northeast Minneapolis in '87, and she moved here because at that time Minnesota was second in the nation on education, and they were looking for teachers of color, Black teachers, and so she felt like she had more opportunities, economic opportunities and educational opportunities for me and my sister when she moved here. And she also loved Prince, so that's another thing that I tell people, that I think she might have thought she was moving here for Prince, but we got
She ain't the only one.
Right. But we got here, and I just try to tell that story because the first places we moved to was North Minneapolis, and then the other place we moved to was Northeast Minneapolis. And I just remember as a child smelling, like literally knowing that I was smelling poison, and asking my mom. I remember specifically in a car ride from North to Northeast, and like as a child, I remember like looking out the windows, and I remember smelling on Broadway. I can't remember exactly on Broadway, but on Broadway specifically, smelling something really horrible and being like, "Mom, what is this smell? It smells like poison." And she was like, "I don't know." And so, fast forward, we moved back and forth from California to Minneapolis, and when I was older, so when I started having kids around 19, in my early 20s, I was learning to be an organizer around that time. But again, I hadn't really thought about environmental justice or environmental racism. I didn't really know of even the term, to be honest. And then when I moved about 7 years ago, I moved to Northside, raising my kids, and about, I want to say in 2011, so about 8 years ago, I had gotten word that there was a company that was wanting to increase their emissions, but that's just pollution in the air. They wanted to increase their emissions by 1,000%. And I mean, when I saw that, and then there was other facts, there was like a fact sheet that they gave me, and it said those who are growing gardens in North and Northeast Minneapolis would have a 50% chance of getting cancer now. And so that was like 1 out of 2 people. And then, I didn't have my own garden, but I was, I knew my community had started to grow more gardens, and we were like on our, we're gonna be so fresh, and healthy, and, we're all pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps out here. And then I heard, that now the vegetables that we eat are 50% more likely to be cancerous. And they use words like carcinogens and emissions and particulate matters, and a lot of this language was very foreign to me. And so again, I have to learn how to just kind of remember throughout this work on the language, because a lot of it is scientific. And but I got in because somebody, bless their hearts, made a fact sheet that was very simple to understand for me, and I was able to share that information with people. And so I really just got involved out of being angry at that moment and being like, oh my God, I gotta tell everybody like what's happening. And the reasons why I was concerned was because I was hearing that I don't know if you guys, I know some people know the movie Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. She played Erin Brockovich. Yeah. It was about California. It was about people getting cancer from a chemical called chromium-6. And so I had heard that that was one of the chemicals. That was the first one that I had heard about. And then I also heard about mercury, that the fact that they weren't really going through the cars the way that they were supposed to. They shred cars, you know, that junk your car for cash stuff. That's a lot of people that's how they make their money. So they're breaking in the cars, but they're not taking out the ignition part, which has mercury in it. So it was like mercury, chromium-6, and then I was hearing about lead, and then I didn't really know what lead was. Lead wasn't, you know, on my radar of danger. I'm from the hood. Like, there's so much danger out there. Like, sometimes you're not thinking about environmental factors that contribute to your health when you're already stressed and you already have health problems. Like, you're not thinking about these things. What lead can do is it's really damaging, from what I've heard, for kids 6 and under. So I guess that is the period of time where their brains are developing, you know, the best and the quickest, and that stunts that growth. Lead has been known to cause people to be irritable, more aggressive, to just delay their abilities to even like learn and probably process things. And so besides that, I mean, lead, I'm sure lead has some other things that a scientist and a doctor could break down that's worse, but I mean, for the most part, that's what I've heard that lead can do, which, you know, they said also some things about like taking test scores. It could contribute to that.
Basically like a form of brain damage from what I understand,
basically,
right?
Right.
All sorts of cognitive disabilities or injuries that can come from lead poisoning.
Speech problems and all that, you know, that makes you, you know, as an organizer, I have to then question and investigate, like, you know, is that why we got a lot of people out here fighting each other? You know, is that why we have kids who are failing in school right now? I mean, is it one of the factors, you know, because there's so many factors involved with what some people call the education gap, what others call the opportunity gap, you know. So there's so many factors that go into this, but like, you know, I just end up having a question, like, is this why people are getting sick? Is this why there's highest foreclosures in Hawthorne neighborhood? You know, when this is the highest, we've got the highest rates of lead, and we've got more kids damaged by lead here than in Flint. I have a student who did some research and put together a zine with another person for, you know, some public health information, and she was able to write in there some facts and some details, and we started to share that information, and people are just like shocked. You know, a lot of people are thinking about, I mean, Flint has a serious problem, and I'm not saying that our problem is bigger than theirs. I'm saying that more kids are lead poisoned here in Hawthorne alone than are in Flint. Like,
yeah, I think people don't realize that there's poverty and oppression and racism in Minneapolis. Like, it gets this image of it's like a liberal paradise and it's very clean here, and maybe poverty might not be as visible as it is if you're in Flint, Michigan. But to be in solidarity is to know, like, yeah, there's people here living in the same conditions, you know, and it might be hidden in a different way, but in some cases more extreme.
right.
So you talked about getting that information sheet that broke down some of the poisons that were coming into the air from Northern Meadows and that people were breathing in North and Northeast Minneapolis. Can you talk a little bit about then any organizing you were involved in around Northern Meadows and kind of what that has led to and where things stand? Kind of walk us from when you got that sheet.
Well, I got that sheet through a Facebook inbox, so I was already pretty vocal. I was already arguing with a group of white people who mostly coming from Hennepin to North, trying to rebrand North Minneapolis into Know Me, and just a lot of people just saw that I was pretty vocal and I wasn't afraid to speak about classism oppression, racism, and so I think that's why I was slipped the information in the first place. And that woman worked for Hawthorne at Hawthorne neighborhood at the time, so she was just kind of like, it felt weird too, like she was slipping me information that like almost had been getting hoarded or kept quiet for a while. And I'm not quite sure why or who was doing that, but I know that at the time, Roberta England was executive director of 2 different neighborhood associations, one Hawthorne and the other one I want to say was Camden. And I remember her reaching out to me as I started to talk about how this had to do with environmental racism. And I remember her, I still have that messages too. If you guys type this up and put it somewhere, you can totally, I still save all these messages. And she sent me a message like, Roxanne, you know, you can't come about this and talk about it like this is racist, you know. But she did tell me that this was like an Aaron Brockovich situation, you know what I mean? But she was really pushing back on me saying it was a racist thing. And, you know, and maybe that's because she wanted me to talk about it more from a classist standpoint, from a classism oppression standpoint, but I think that what she doesn't understand is, you know, as a white woman, you can't tell me as a black woman to not speak about, you know, my perspective and experience of things. You know, that even goes against, you know, the unity of people who fight against classism and capitalism is like, you know, you have to acknowledge, you know, the racism within it just as much as you acknowledge the classism within it, because there is no capitalistic society without a group of people who are denied access to certain resources. So to keep going forward, I just kept saying it was racist anyway, even though they were like, don't do it. And actually it got people's attention, you know? It got people to start paying attention a little more, and it got people to just basically on Facebook, and because I didn't really like email a lot, but I guess I was sending little emails here and there. I was making phone calls. I was mostly on Facebook though, and I would invite people to like the community public hearing meetings. I also would demand at certain events. There was a North First event at City View, which is one of the schools closest to Northern Meadows. There was an event there where everybody was talking about green this and green that and like clean energy, and we're gonna make gardens, and this was before Eco Village was out there, so they were talking about Eco Village and building that apartment complex. And I just got on the mic and was like, how are we going to build all these wonderful community amenities on top of pollution? Like, that doesn't make any sense. You know, so before we get all giddy about these small homes that we could build and all these other different ways that we can paint pretty pictures and put bike lanes on the road, like, why don't we just clean up the neighborhood first so people are healthy, you know? And everybody was, you know, I'm always kind of like the downer at these events, because people want to be, you know, let's move forward and let's make things pretty, and then it's like out of sight, out of mind. Like, even with the garbage incinerator, people are saying that's better than the landfill, but no, it's not. Like, we're still getting that into our lungs and stuff. It may not be going into the soil, into the water right away as it is with the landfill, but air and water and soil is connected. It's gonna come back around eventually. And so it was a lot of me pushing these places, and I remember that day, like, you guys should be paying, you know, all these neighborhood organizations, and I think the park board was there, and I was like, y'all need to pay for a bus to transport people from North Minneapolis to St. Paul for this meeting that's about us, but then these people who are not even from our neighborhoods, they're making the decisions. Mm-hmm. And so it was a lot of me, like, really just pushing on people, like, yo, you need to pay for this, you need to get on this, like, we're out here suffering and y'all are sitting up in here like collecting benefits. And so I know we went to I had people from the community, they would come to the meetings so people would testify. And a lot of us didn't know what we were talking about, like other than the fact sheet that we had to work with. But there we met more people. I met Louis Alamayu, I met Lee Fache, and Karen Monahan.
And these are environmental organizers
gurus,
in town.
like,
Yeah, right. The elders.
The elders, exactly. I mean, Karen Monahan's not necessarily an elder, but she, she was one of the people who were out here trying.
These other folks were already aware of what was happening with Northern Meadows and some of the toxins in the air, and y'all were coming together in these spaces, starting to make connections and form this movement.
Yes, these other people did know, and I had never met them up until then. I actually, I was still in the beginning of working on foreclosure prevention with Northside Community Reinvestment Coalition, which is a national organization. It's National Reinvestment or National Community Reinvestment Coalition. There's a lot of acronyms out here. But I was also sitting on NERC, which was Northside Residents Redevelopment Council, and that was one of the most prominent neighborhood organizations that came after the uprisings on Plymouth. And so I was just kind of entering the political scene. Raymond Dean had asked me for his support in his campaign. We got Raymond Dean in there. Northside Community Reinvestment Coalition was, we were doing triage with families out here. So that's kind of how I figured out that Hawthorne had the highest rates of foreclosures. And so, I started to do door knocking on my own by myself, paying for my own flyers, out of my own pocket. Really just like grimy too. Like I didn't have any support financially to do this work. So I was pretty much, my daughters were coming to the meetings. And then I was asking people questions in Hawthorne, like, do you know anybody with asthma? And like the majority of people that I was asking was like, yeah, my little sister, yeah, my son, I do. Like somebody had asthma over there. And I was telling people information, but I would notice that like some people that I would meet out there who were like, yeah, I'll be there, and this is fucked up. Like they weren't making it, they weren't coming. And so I knew, we're talking about poor people. We're talking about people who are already struggling. And I just, it would frustrate me, but then I also knew it wasn't their fault because I knew how hard it was for me to get to these places. So it was a lot of me using my Facebook network. People who didn't even live here sometimes were coming over here supporting. Araya Fine, who I met through a parent group and who was also part of NERC organization, that people just started to help. Raymond Dean started to use his privilege and his, political power to show up. Kenya Mcknight, she's supported me a lot of the time. Kenya Mcknight has supported me and shared this information, and it was like the key players were out there supporting. So we didn't, they say you only need a handful of people, and that's pretty much how we got it done. We got maybe 1,000 signatures at some point on our petition. And although I didn't have any real strategy building techniques, a lot of people are like, be more strategic. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. A lot of what I was doing was just trying, as a mom, what do I need to do to get this information out there? I'm thinking in terms of just what do people want to know? So then there was moments where I had to agitate people on Facebook, constantly overburdening people with the information, but then I had to break down some of the information, okay, they don't know what chromium-6 is and mercury and all that, so I started to go in further and be this is what mercury does, this is what chromium can do, this is what, you know what I mean? And then people started to pay attention a little more. Then sometimes people started to call me and do interviews, or I was a meeting person. I would show up, I would push the MPCA. I kept telling them, how dare you, all y'all old white men, you don't live over here. How are you making these decisions for my people? So it was a lot of aggressive, agitating tactics.
Hell yeah, a lot of heart, a lot of grind.
Yeah.
And that led to from my understanding, right, there ended up being a $2.5 million settlement with Northern Metals. That was more about a technicality. It was because Northern Metals was found to be underreporting the amount of toxins they were putting into the air. So in a sense, that's like a community victory, but it wasn't like they acknowledged the harm that they did or they were shut down. It was on a technicality, not for the sheer injustice of these years of pollution.
Well, so I'll say this. I think that I think technicality would be a good word to use for it, because technically they weren't in trouble for the shredding. They got in trouble because they had some other part of the facility in there that wasn't being reported. Like they had something in there, some sort of shed, something that was doing something. And that's how they got caught up. But I think that all the attention that was brought on them, and then, you know, we begged for a monitor in the area right next to it. And then when they were fighting and pushing back on MPCA, the community was like, oh, hell no, like, you know, like it started to be like the support system, because they were pretty much bullying MPCA in some sort of way, right? And then they were like suing them, and like, they went to court. One of the most interesting parts of this fight, that to me, was they went to court because they heard that the community was coming, right? Like they heard that we were demanding to have a longer comment period before they made their decision on anything in regards. And so they started to like, well, y'all taking too long, and every day that you're taking too long, you're causing us money problems. You know what I'm saying? Like you're fucking with our money. And so they tried to sue the MPCA, and the MPCA, but they went to what's interesting is they went to a judge, and they got something called some sort of, God, I don't even know, because a lot of that shit is like Latin terms, but it's like they got some sort of Macadamus. Right? Yeah, like what the fuck is that? So they went and got something from this judge that would basically speed up the process to make MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, have to make a decision ASAP. This judge used to be an attorney for the same law firm that was representing Northern Metals at the time.
Wow.
So eventually she had to recluse herself because people got word of that, and I got word of that, so I started spreading that, and I'm like, this is crazy. They're like the mafia, like they got all these connections, and like, and Northern Metals were being bullied, so they got caught up for their own greed, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not quite sure who Northern Metals exactly is. When I ask questions about like, so the Isaacs family, who owns the land, is what I'm hearing, who leases the land. I'm trying to figure out who they are, where they are, why we can't talk to them, who are they? They might be in these rooms, but you wouldn't know because they don't speak up. And so, and even when I was asking who owns the land, it was almost like top secret, you know, but it's public information, so I don't understand why it's being treated as such. So I'm still kind of confused on who exactly owns Northern Metals, because Northern Metals, it was a conjurator or whatever. That's the name of the shredder, I think. Okay. Before Northern Metals. And a lot of the stuff over there is like Northern, like the first name Northern. And that could be because it's on the north side, but it also, I'm hearing that there's some European countries. So like Northern Metals, their owners are in Europe. So it's deep. Like this isn't even people, you know, from this area. Yeah. These are people from a whole nother continent.
It's like an international ruling class that's really impacting local decisions at a level where people can't even access them. Right. Yeah, that's wild.
And a lot of these places are grandfathered, which I've started to question. Well, what does grandfathering mean? Like, what law is that? Can you point to it in a book somewhere and show me 3.5, 6, 7, 8? Like, what is grandfathering? Who determines what's grandfathering? Who determines that this stays a grandfathered place? When did these policies and these nicknames for, because now I learned grandfathering is not even the term. That's just stuff people say. But everybody accepts it. So as soon as somebody says it's grandfathered, it's like, oh, it's grandfathered. All right, next on the agenda.
So let me see if I know what grandfathering means, because we talked with Nancy from the Botano Neighborhood Association about the GAF shingles factory, and the way she broke down grandfathering was that in the 70s, there was a new law that the Environmental Protection Agency passed that had new regulations designed to limit air pollution. But they said, since you've been over here rocking since the 1930s, you already got your thing going on, you're grandfathered in, you're subject to the old laws, and any new plants will come online. So they were getting measured by standards that were very old and out of date and had purposefully meant to be changed, but they were able to like use their influence in order to get special laws, get grandfathered in under the old laws. So that's the same as Northern Meadows?
I believe so. They still are going to be on that land, using that land. I haven't heard about whether or not they're gonna have to like move all that metal away. They're probably still gonna use it as like a drop-off spot.
So are they closing the whole?
No, they're just
moving the shredder.
They're just not gonna be able to shred that stuff, which is a big victory.
It's certainly salute on everything, by the way. Like when I said technicality, I wasn't
No, it's
diminishing.
important for people to know what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Because I didn't even know. I mean, like, and I can't take full credit for any of it. You know what I mean? But I feel like when community gets together and we start making noise, and then they were being greedy and selfish, you know what I mean? Like, it was just a combination of the universe and politics and everything put together, but definitely the people led that.
Certainly. So from my understanding, so what happened is there was a $2.5 million settlement, and Northern Meadows has to shut down their shredder and move it. And I want to talk about that in a second. But I wanted to ask you about this money, because from what I read, there was some controversy around, out of the 2.5 million, only 600,000 goes to Minneapolis. And then that has some restrictions around it as far as like how it gets to the actual community that was getting the asthmas or getting the lead poisoning. Can you talk about that a bit? Like, just, am I right in that assessment? And then I'm curious to know how you feel about that settlement. And I also would like to know, if that falls short of justice, to me that falls short of justice. That's not a real reparation for what Northern Meadows was doing. What would justice look like in this situation? Like, if you had more power, what would not if you had more power, but if we were running things, what would be good compensation? What would you like to see happen on that land? How would you like to see them held accountable? What would justice look like?
Well, GAF doesn't want to leave unless they get $75 million. So part of that would be $75 million if that's what it takes to kick off, you know, that's the last result that I would like to use, is to pay off this pollutant company to leave. But I would say that would be one part of the financial that I would ask for, because whether we would use it for that or for a lawyer, I don't know. But a lot of money, definitely a lot more money than 600,000 would be great.
Chump change when you're talking about these gazillion-dollar companies.
GAF is a $1 billion corporation, and I'm pretty sure $3 billion corporation. They bought the land for $1, which that's an injustice. I'm trying to figure out how the hell that happened.
Yeah.
And so, no, I was very upset over the fact that they were trying to offer us some blood hush money to keep us cool for the next 3 years of having to endure their pollution, you know. And so, you know, I went to a couple of the meetings where they were asking community, like, what would we want? I will say I'm probably the one who pushed MPCA to even think about giving any money to the community, because I kept asking one of the community people from the MPCA, what sense does it make that you guys, on these fines, you never give any money back to the community? Like, if we're the ones going through the hardship, why the hell would y'all keep the money? And so, you know, and it was explained to me some goofy ass response about why, but like, still doesn't make sense to me. That's another part of the injustice of these things, is most of the time these places aren't even fined, okay? And then when they are, the money goes back into a general environmental fund. And so I was against taking any of the money. I was like, get these motherfuckers out of here. Like, we don't need your fucking money. You know, just get out of here. And they were like, well, I think you'll like what's happening? I can't really tell you what's going on in the negotiation room. I don't even know. And I'm like, yeah, right. You know, I know you know, because you know what I mean? Like we were having conversations about, what should be done with the money. And so at some point I had heard that it was just gonna be a settlement, and I was frustrated because I just felt like MPCA, they get paid to do this work, and they were ready to give up right away when they heard that they could get a little money back for the fees, for their hardship of fighting. It was almost like they made peace with Northern Metals because they had been having some shit going on for so long that now they were like, oh, okay, you didn't fire the people. Northern Metals had fired the manager who was being an ass, and being the greed, the ones who were just wilding out, they were let go, and then they put new faces on Northern Metals so that they looked better. And then I think it was good enough for MPCA, and everybody just kind of wanted it to go away and to hush down. I think that's what happened, and so we got the settlement. And so even then, I was really just disgusted, and I kind of was just kind of through with this. I mean, I really wanted to be done with the whole, it had been 6 years of fighting, and I was just even when I first found out in the beginning, when they were trying to increase their pollution by 1,000%, when we actually went down there for that specific meeting, they ended up, on paper, they were asking for a 4.8 increase, right? That's what it looked like on paper on the number. And then they ended up getting a 2.4 increase. So they still did 500% increase on us, you know what I mean? So when I left that meeting, I was sick. This isn't no victory. I'm sick, right? That's a 25% chance you're gonna get cancer. I was just sad. I remember crying. I remember just I just woke up. I woke up to understanding how this business shit works, and it was hella depressing, but I would have thought 6-7 years later that they would have had to stop shredding. To me, it was worth the fight. It was worth it, and I can't wait to see what since we'll still have the monitors out there for at least a year after, I can't wait to see what the difference is so we can actually get some facts around what was happening, and then I just can't wait to see babies being able to breathe better, hearing that the conditions are going down. We've got the highest rates of hospitalizations with asthma and breathing problems. I can't wait to see the differences, and sometimes that information doesn't come out for 3 years later, so that's gonna be kind of the part that's gonna be hard for me, is waiting for that data. But I mean, I really, what feeds my soul in this work is seeing people smile, seeing people feel like we've had some sort of victory, knowing that the people are feeling the impact of what we've done, and that helps me sleep at night and know that what I'm doing is worth it.
Real shit. I wanted to ask, you said moving here from California, you went back and forth between North and Northeast Minneapolis. And a part of this podcast that I'm doing, I'm from Northeast Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. Everything is revolving around this north side, northeast riverfront, because I'm talking about the Upper Harbor Terminal.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put it in the context in terms of can you talk a little bit about what that was like going back and forth from the north side to northeast? If you could say anything about those communities to somebody who's listening, who might not be familiar, how would you describe the relationship between North and Northeast Minneapolis and just that whole environment, if you got any insight into that?
Yeah, well, when you think about that, Northeast was one of the areas that Black people couldn't go into back in the day. I think that there's racial tensions between us, but I also think, when I grew up, I went to Pillsbury.
My brother went to Pillsbury.
Pillsbury and Putnam were kind of the brother and sisters. You went to Putnam?
For a year, yeah.
But we shared, if you went to these schools, you knew that North Side and Northeast shared buses every morning. Whether you went to Pillsbury or Putnam, we shared buses, so we would ride together. So the kids were we were brought together in a way more than our parents were, maybe. Mm-hmm. I remember my first little boyfriend when I moved to Northeast, his name was Josh. I remember, he was a little white boy. And I just remember white boys would send letters and they would like hold hands. It was a different thing, but I was a kid. I was like kindergarten, first grade, don't tell nobody I had little boyfriends, but we didn't do anything. It was just we were boyfriend and girlfriend and that was it. But one day we were hanging out and I'm telling the story because I really liked him. He was a good friend. I have pictures of like us hanging off each other, smiling and laughing. And one day he said he couldn't play with me and he called me up crying. I was like, what's wrong? He was like, my mom said I can't play with you anymore. And I was like, why? And he was like, because you're black. And I just remember like being 5 years old and hearing that shit and just being like, man, that's crazy, but it was like a wake-up call of how divided we were. I remember a Native American, indigenous young boy asking me if I was mulatto in kindergarten. And I didn't know what that was at the time. Then I learned later that it was like a derogatory term for people who were, of different ethnicity. So me, I'm, my father is Irish, white, and I'm Black, and my mom has German and indigenous roots. So I'm a mixture of a lot of stuff here. And so I remember my first experiences having to learn about racism at a young age. But I also remember the similarities of us, of being poor. Like I remember, you didn't really notice, like I remember some of my first friends were like Polish, we were running around, they were teaching me Polish bad words and shit. And like, I don't know, I remember like the kids were trying to connect and the parents were like, nah, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And so, I still always remember these memories. And so I have a connection to Northeast, thank God, you know what I'm saying? That I had this connection. So I know that, we're going through classism oppression. And I know that there's this force outside of us, this elite force that is doing everything that it can to separate us, right? So that we don't unify. They got the river separating our boundaries when it should be bringing us together. And they got
Amen.
They got the freeways separating us. And I don't know, I come over to Northeast every morning. Well, not every morning, but I spend a lot of money coming over here to East Side Co-op, getting smoothies and carrot juices, and like, I still love Northeast, but also I've lived over South, so I have connections over South, and I like that. I like that I'm able to move around. It's probably part of my privilege of being a light-skinned woman who's had more experiences and who's been able to because of my light skin, I've been able to get into certain places in certain rooms. Because I'm not saying anything different from anything other leaders or other people in the movement have been saying, who are darker skinned than me. Like I was seen as less threatening, and I was able to get into these rooms.
Hey, well, I've never seen anybody take as good of advantage of it. Like one thing I really admire about you is just you're a fierce truth teller. Like I've seen you tell the truth when it's unpopular. I've seen people come around to it being popular after you were already saying it, and being constantly willing to raise your voice and speak the hard truth. And this organizing is not easy, and you're out here doing it as a mother, working, paying the bills, doing your thing, and showing up for other people. So it's a huge salute. It's like a real honor to speak to you. Hell yeah. The last question I had was around the Upper Harbor, and I'm just curious because it is a piece of land on this riverfront, this polluted, toxic riverfront, and now there's an opportunity there. Do you have hopes for the Upper Harbor? What would you like to see there? Anything you'd like to say? I think you already provided the context. I'm trying to walk the line with this podcast of getting into the specifics of the Upper Harbor, but not getting bogged down in terms of, we're really talking about white supremacy and capitalism and revolutionary change, and this is just like a window into it. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are with the Upper Harbor Terminal.
Well, I started out learning about the Upper Harbor Terminal maybe about 4.5 years ago. And so what is it? It's 2019 now, so sometime in 2014, 2015. And I had learned about it through Juxtaposition Arts, which I do some mentorship with youth there in a community engagement lab called Tactical Urbanism, where we also create spaces where people can gather and feel more comfortable to gather in, and to also just be able to engage and talk about issues like this, for people who cannot make it into these meeting spaces. We're on the block playing games, dominoes, reaching people and having conversations with them as they're in transit, to kind of make it easier to bring that information back to these sort of developments. So Juxta was hired to do, Tactical Urbanism Lab specifically was hired to do community engagement. But before we were hired to do that, Juxta was hired by, I want to say the parks at some point. The Environmental Design Lab was hired to think about a lot of what is still out there today are like old agricultural buildings and such that had certain things inside of it, like those domes.
Yeah.
So Juxta was tasked to try to figure out how we can preserve the history of the agricultural area, and like what we could use and do with that. I know Juxta had the youth there had pretty good ideas around like using the domes as like indoor gardens that you could see through, and just like, just the way that they designed the area was super dope.
Yeah.
So that was the first part that I think Juxta came in on. So we were pretty excited about how we could transform that area from the beginning. Because Juxta is not a political organization. Well, and when I say political, there's so many meanings around the words politics, but Juxta is an arts program that hires young people and gets jobs for them, right? That's the goal. It started out as an after school. We know from data and from statistics that kids who go through some sort of arts-based program, they're more likely to enter into college or go on to something brilliant in their world. Juxta has more of a designing kind of direction with our work. And so about time Upper Harbor Terminal got to me, it seemed pretty exciting still as I was looking at kind of what we were doing and how we were helping. And then I started to have some questions around what type of housing is gonna be built here. Like that was my first kind of like, how is housing gonna be determined? Because this area is a promise zone, it's a green zone, so we're supposed to be putting in more low income housing, and we're supposed to be having more economic opportunities for people over here. So there was a lot of question around who was going to have access to these homes. So I literally started to kind of be on the defensive side of the project, because I was concerned that it was going to be a bunch of condos and it was going to look like the other side of the river, and which made me feel like, okay, so then what's going to happen to us once things start to look better? And I started to feel frustrated as an organizer and an activist who've been working on cleaning up the river, and helping to make some of these even ideas possible for change on the river. It was almost like, we're out here doing the hard work, and then people are coming in and taking advantage off of that hard work and not even thinking about what's gonna happen to us. And so there's a lot of question around gentrification, and I started to bring it up. And then I ended up saying, you know what, as an organizer and as an activist, I'm gonna have to step away from this project, because just basically I felt like it was out of alignment of the principles that I had been working on. And my reputation means a lot to me, I like the fact that I haven't been bought or sold. I really love that. It helps me sleep at night to know that at any point, there's plenty of people who would pay me to sell out my community. And it would make my life a lot easier, me and my kids. But I know that at the end of the day, I need, in my life, I've made a decision years ago that I don't want to leave this world and not make it a better place. Like, I don't want to be here just sitting here soaking up, taking up space on earth and not having anything to show for, not leave my kids any sort of legacy, not leave my kids a better neighborhood. So I have a lot of reasons why I can't. The real deal of this work is just know that there are nights where things are so hard for me, where I wish I could be like other people and just like, yo, write me that check. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get out of here. You know, it's like the matrix of like, you know, I'm tired of eating this fucking porridge and give me the other pill, you know?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I am who I am, and my experiences have, I think, brought me up to this point. So I know that Upper Harbor Terminal, it's not, as it is as of now, it is not for the people. And so my job as an organizer, I believe, is to either make it for the people or to push back on it. And so that's where I am.
I'm super thankful for this interview, and really though, because
Anytime, Jane.
and it's beyond talking about the specifics of what's gonna happen with the Upper Harbor, but for me it's about people knowing what the North Side and what Northeast really looks like, and what like the real grassroots artists and organizers and geniuses that we got in our community, and you're one of them. It's like, I'm really proud to be connected to you, you know what I'm saying? Speak, hell yeah, shout out Speak.
Solidarity, if you're funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans, about as far as they can see to keep them coming. Bands building up the company. Shauna told me I was gonna be prosperous. I listen. I'm just praying, make a place a positive addition. Try to knock me off my spot would be preposterous. Y'all fishing in this bitch, illuminate like phosphorus. I glisten, gliding like a Christ on the water. Now you're christened, sliding like I'm ice over top the opposition. Hold a vision in my mind and make it pop about fruition, expanding these dimensions.